My own father, the one who should have protected me, made me a mother at 16. While he slept, my mother and I turned our prison into ashes. To this day, I don't know if he managed to escape the flames that devoured our house and our hell. Good morning, my dears. What a joy to be here talking with you all. I'm Catherine Martin Olson, 73 years young, born in Springfield, Missouri, but today I live here in Oakwood, a small town in rural Georgia. A peaceful place, you know? Where mornings arrive slowly with birdsong and the smell of fresh coffee. These days, I devote my time to my small family restaurant right in the center of town. Catherine's Country Kitchen started as a little food stand at the farmer's market over 30 years ago when I needed to support my daughter on my own. Now it's the most beloved meeting spot around here. Everyone comes to try my fried chicken, homemade biscuits, and that peach cobbler that just melts in your mouth. Each recipe carries a little piece of my story, you know? The flavors are like memories we keep, even when time seems to want to erase everything. My restaurant is my sacred little corner. On the exposed brick walls, I've hung old photographs of the town, and some of my daughter Marianne and my 3 wonderful grandchildren. I have an old accordion that belonged to my friend Tommy, may he rest in peace, displayed near the entrance. On weekends, I hire local musicians to play folk tunes while folks enjoy their dinner. It's a simple place, but full of life and laughter, something that took me a long time to find in this life. But before I continue with my story, I'd like to make a heartfelt request to those of you watching now. If this story touches your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. That little red button makes all the difference in helping others hear what I have to share. And you know what? Tell me in the comments, which town are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this video? With your morning coffee, after lunch, or already at night wrapped in a blanket? I love reading all the comments and knowing there are people from so many different places listening to this old lady. Let's create a chain of kindness, shall we? Today, I'm going to tell a story I've carried for many years, buried deep in my heart. A story about survival, about how sometimes we need to go through fire to be reborn from the ashes. Not always is the family God gives us the one that protects us, my dears. Sometimes, danger lives under the same roof, carries the same last name. But I also want to talk about how I managed, by the grace of the Lord, to build a new life after so much suffering. Let me take you back in time to when I was just a little girl, living in a small house in Springfield. My childhood in Springfield, in the 1950s, was a time of many contradictions. I was born in a simple house on Maple Street, near downtown. A light blue wooden house with a large backyard where my mother, Margaret, planted a little bit of everything: potatoes, corn, squash, and even a cherry tree that took years to bear fruit. I remember there was a chicken coop in the back and a cement wash basin where sometimes my mother would let me play with water on hot days. My father, Walter Thompson, was an army sergeant. A tall man with rigid posture like the uniform he wore, always neatly trimmed hair, and a thick mustache he took great care of. He participated in training across various regions of the country, but managed to get transferred to serve at the Springfield base because my mother was an only child and needed to stay close to my elderly grandparents. At home, Daddy reproduced military discipline in everything. The schedules were rigid: breakfast at 6, lunch at noon, and dinner at 6 o'clock, not a minute more or less. Everything had to be done his way, even how clothes were folded in the closet. He said that an organized house is a sign of character, and so he inspected every corner as if he were at the barracks. Mama obeyed without question, her eyes always lowered when he spoke, those calloused hands from working so hard always restless, adjusting the tablecloth, cleaning imaginary dust. Margaret, my mother, was delicate inside, but strong in appearance. She had long black hair that she braided and pinned in a bun. Her brown eyes seemed to hold secrets, always melancholic, even when she smiled. She was an excellent cook. She made an apple pie that everyone in the neighborhood asked for the recipe, and homemade bread that perfumed the entire street. She sewed our clothes, tended the garden, cleaned the house from top to bottom, and still had time to tell me stories before bed when Daddy wasn't around. I was an only child. My mother always said that God only sent me to her because I was too special to be shared with siblings. Later, I understood that she probably couldn't have more children, though we never openly talked about it. I grew up feeling the weight of being the only hope in that marriage, the only joy in that house that sometimes seemed more like a barracks than a home. At school, I was a shy but studious girl. Springfield Elementary was a 15-minute walk from my house. I always went with the same little blue cotton dress that Mama sewed to look just like the other girls' uniforms, but made at home because it was cheaper. My hair was tied in 2 braids with white ribbons, and I carried a brown leather satchel that had been my father's when he was a child. My first-grade teacher, Mrs. Jackson, was a middle-aged lady who had the patience of an angel with children. She was the one who noticed I liked to draw and encouraged me, giving me colored pencils as a present on my 8th birthday. Daddy didn't like it. He said it was a waste, that I should focus on learning useful things like math. But Mama hid the pencils in a box under my bed, and I drew in secret when he wasn't home. The games back then were simple but so much fun. We played Ring Around the Rosie, singing London Bridge is Falling Down, and Here We Go Round the Mulberry Bush. I loved jumping rope with the neighborhood girls, especially with Lucy and Teresa, my best friends. Lucy lived 3 houses down from mine and had a collection of 5 rag dolls her grandmother made. Teresa was Mr. Jensen's daughter, who owned the bakery on the corner, and she always brought a piece of cake or cookie to share with us. On Sunday afternoons, when Daddy allowed, we would go to the town square to get ice cream and watch the municipal band play in the gazebo. It was an important event in town, everyone dressed in their best clothes. Mama spent the previous day preparing my Sunday dress, starching the petticoats, polishing my only pair of patent leather shoes. I felt like a princess in those moments, even knowing that when we returned home, reality would be different. The county fair was the most anticipated event of the year in Springfield. The entire town was decorated, and farmers brought their best produce for the exhibition. There was music, food, and even a small carnival that came from far away, especially for the occasion. Daddy didn't like crowds, but my mother always found a way to take me to see the lights and eat cotton candy, even if just for half an hour. It was around my 9th year that I began to notice a change at home. Daddy, who had always been severe, began to get more irritated than usual. Any little thing was cause for shouting, and sometimes I would hear the sound of things breaking in the living room after I went to bed. Mama would appear at breakfast with swollen eyes, saying it was an allergy to the pollen from the backyard flowers. I pretended to believe her, even knowing that the flowers only bloomed in spring, and we were in winter. At school, Mrs. Evans, my 3rd-grade teacher, began to call me for talks after class. "Catherine, is everything okay at home?" she would ask, with those kind eyes behind round glasses. I always answered yes, as Daddy had taught me. "What happens at home stays at home," he would say, in that voice that allowed no argument. I remember a specific day when I was 10. It was the day of the school spring festival, and all the children would perform in a square dance. We needed colorful gingham dresses. Mama sewed mine with such care, using scraps she had saved, making each ruffle with perfection. When Daddy saw it, he tore the dress to pieces in front of me, saying he hadn't raised a daughter to be jumping around like a goat in a pagan festival. It was the first time I saw my mother confront him, albeit with a trembling voice. She sewed another dress that same night, in secret, and took me to the festival while he was on duty at the base. When we returned home, we found Daddy waiting in the living room, sitting in the armchair with his military belt in his hands. That night, Mama made me promise that no matter what happened, I would always be strong and never let anyone diminish my worth. "We're like bamboo, my child," she whispered as she tucked me in. "We can bend a lot with the wind, but we never break." From that night on, something began to change at home. Daddy's eyes, which before looked at me with indifference, now followed me around the house in a way that made my stomach turn cold. He began to find fault with everything about me, The way I walked, how I talked, even the way I combed my hair. "Looks like an awkward tomboy," he would say, or "a girl of 11 shouldn't wiggle her hips like that." I didn't understand what I was doing wrong. I just knew that somehow my mere existence had begun to deeply irritate him. Mama tried to protect me as best she could. She would invent tasks to keep me busy in the kitchen when he came home irritated from the base. She would send me to Grandma Betty's house, her mother, when the tension at home became unbearable. My grandmother lived 3 blocks from us, in an even smaller house, but it seemed like an oasis of peace. It was there that I learned to make typical Southern treats: apple butter, peach preserves, pecan pie. Grandma Betty would say that busy hands keep sad thoughts away, and she was right. Grandpa George, Mama's father, had passed away when I was very little, but the stories about him kept his memory alive. They said he was a good man who treated my grandmother like a queen. Sometimes, lying on the thin mattress in the back room of Grandma Betty's house, I would imagine what it would be like if my father were like my grandfather. How our lives would be without screams, without fear. My father's parents, my paternal grandparents, I barely knew. They lived far away, in Kansas City, and rarely visited us. Grandma Dorothy was a serious lady of few words, always dressed in black even though she wasn't in mourning. Grandpa Harold had the same military bearing as my father, the same hard eyes. When they came to visit, the house would become even quieter, as if even the air was afraid to make noise. When I turned 12, I realized that childhood was slipping away and that life would be even more complicated from then on. My body was changing, and this seemed to disturb my father even more. Mama explained to me, in whispers, about the transformations I was going through. She taught me to use the cotton pads she sewed herself for the special lady days, as she called them. "Now you need to be even more careful," she told me, with a look that carried more worry than pride for the daughter who was becoming a woman. And it was during this period that things really began to change for the worse in our house, in that end of childhood that seemed to have been abruptly cut off, like a flower plucked before fully blooming. My 13th birthday changed everything. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was March 1965, a sunny Saturday, one of those with a sky so blue it seems hand-painted. Mama had woken up early and prepared a cornbread with honey, my favorite. She whispered, "Happy birthday, my flower," while combing my hair with that look full of love that only mothers have. Daddy was off duty that day. He sat at the breakfast table still in his pajamas, something rare for a man who lived in uniform, even at home. "So the girl has become a young lady," he said, looking at me differently while cutting a slice of cornbread. It wasn't a loving look from a proud father. It was something else that, in my innocence, I couldn't identify, but it made my stomach turn cold. It was on this day that I received my first young lady dress, as Mama called it. A light blue dress with white polka dots, which she had sewn in secret for weeks. When I put it on, I realized that my body really was changing. The thinner waist, the beginning of breasts, the more rounded shapes. Mama taught me to walk like a young lady, with an upright posture and light steps. "Catherine is no longer a child, Walter," I heard Mama say to my father as they washed the dishes. "We need to respect her space now." "I know very well what she is," he replied, in a tone that made Mama immediately fall silent. At school, things were also changing. My period came a few months after my birthday, and with it came new challenges. The other girls were already talking about boys, about love letters hidden in notebooks. I remained shy, preferring to stay with my drawings and books during recess. The school library became my refuge. Among the dusty shelves, I could travel far away, be whoever I wanted, away from my father's severe eyes. Miss Clotilde, the librarian, a lady with gray hair and a gentle smile, noticed my interest in reading and began to set aside special books for me. "These are only for mature young ladies like you," she would say, handing me novels like Wuthering Heights and Pride and Prejudice. I devoured those pages, imagining what it would be like to live those intense and complicated love stories. At home, The atmosphere grew heavier each day. Daddy began to find fault with everything: the length of my skirts, the time I spent at school, the friendships I had. "A proper young lady doesn't stay out after 5, he would say, forcing me to run home from school, unable to participate in any extracurricular activities. One afternoon, I returned 10 minutes late because I stayed to help Miss Clotilde organize some new books. When I got home, I found Daddy at the door, arms crossed, his face red with anger. "Where were you?" he asked, grabbing my arm forcefully. "At the library, Daddy, helping Miss Clotilde with the—" I didn't finish the sentence. The slap came quickly and strongly, making me stagger backward. "Liar! You think I don't know what girls your age are doing out there? Sneaking around with boys, getting lost with the town rascals?" Mama came running from the kitchen at the commotion, her eyes wide with fear. "Walter, for God's sake, she was just at school." "You shut your mouth," he shouted, pointing his finger at her. "It's your fault she's like this, all provocative. You were the one who made that indecent dress for her." That night, for the first time, I was sent to bed without dinner. Lying in bed, with the mark of his fingers still burning on my face, I heard the shouting in the living room, the sound of things breaking, and then my mother's muffled crying. From then on, Daddy began to create even stricter rules. I could no longer wear the dresses Mama made, only skirts below the knee and high-necked blouses. My hair, which before was loose or in braids, now had to always be tied in a severe bun, like a respectable young lady. He began to pick me up from school every day, waiting at the gate with that military posture, making all my friends stay away intimidated. Even the house seemed to change. The small mirror I had in my room disappeared. "So you don't admire yourself like a vain girl," he explained. The curtains in my room, which were of a light, flowery fabric, were replaced by thick, dark curtains. The bathroom door got a new rule: it could no longer be locked. "And 15-minute baths, not a second more," he ordered. Mama tried to intervene as best she could, always whispering to me that this will pass, that he's just worried. But I saw in her eyes that not even she believed that. Sometimes, when he wasn't there, she would hug me tightly and say, "You are a beautiful and special girl, Catherine. Never forget that." It was around this time that I began to notice something even more disturbing. Some nights, I would wake up to a noise at my bedroom door. I would open my eyes in the dark and see his silhouette standing at the partially open door, just observing. I would pretend to still be asleep, my heart beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. After a few minutes, he would close the door and return to his room. One night, I told Mama about this. "You must be dreaming, my child," she said, but her voice trembled in a way that betrayed the lie. "Your father is just checking if we're safe. It's his job to protect the family." But I knew that wasn't it. Those eyes in the darkness weren't of protection. They were of something I still didn't fully understand, but which filled me with a visceral fear. At school, my grades began to fall. I couldn't concentrate. I spent classes drawing dark spirals in the corners of notebooks, startled at every noise. Miss Martha, my English teacher, called me after class one day. "Catherine, what's happening? You were one of the best students, and now I can barely recognize your work." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words got stuck. What could I say? That I was afraid to go home? That my own father terrified me? That I woke up every morning with a knot in my stomach, wishing night would never come? "I'm just tired," I replied, forcing a smile. "I'll try harder, I promise." She didn't believe me, of course. No one would believe that forced smile. But in those days, family problems weren't discussed outside the home. What happens within 4 walls stays within 4 walls, as Grandma Betty used to say. It was around this time that the milk ritual began. It was something so bizarre that for a long time I thought I had imagined it all. It started on a particularly cold night in July. I was sleeping when my bedroom door opened. At first, I thought it was the usual observation, but this time he came in. I felt the mattress sink with his weight sitting on the edge of my bed. "Wake up, Catherine," he said, his voice strangely calm. I opened my eyes, pretending I had just woken up, fear running cold through my veins. "Yes, Daddy?" He was holding a glass of milk. "Drink this. It will help you sleep better." I sat up in bed, confused. Daddy had never brought me anything to drink before. I took the glass with trembling hands and took a small sip. The taste was horrible, sour, and strange. "It's spoiled," I said, trying to return the glass. "Drink it all," he ordered, without moving. "It's good for disciplining the body." With tears in my eyes, I forced myself to swallow that disgusting liquid, my stomach turning in protest. When I finished, he took the empty glass, looked at me for a long moment, and left without saying anything more. The next morning, I woke up feeling sick, with a stomachache and a strange sensation on my skin. When I looked at myself in the small hand mirror I hid under the mattress, I saw that my face was blotchy, with small red eruptions. The sour smell of milk seemed to have permeated my hair, my skin. "Mom, I'm feeling sick," I said when I reached the kitchen. Mama looked at me, startled by my appearance, but before she could say anything, Daddy came in. "She looks sick," Mama murmured, putting her hand on my forehead. "It's nothing," he said, cutting the bread with unnecessary force. "She probably ate something she shouldn't have yesterday. Go wash up for school, Catherine." "But she has a fever, Walter. Maybe she should stay home today." "She's going to school," he said, in a tone that ended any discussion. "She'll learn not to be weak." I dragged myself to the bathroom, feeling dizzy and nauseated. The bath didn't take away that strange smell from my skin, nor did it alleviate the discomfort. At school, I spent the entire morning with my head down, avoiding looking at my classmates, feeling that everyone could smell that odor that seemed to emanate from me. The next night, he returned with the glass of milk, and the next, and the next. Always the same silent ritual, the glass of spoiled milk, the order to drink it all, the heavy silence afterward. Sometimes he would spill some of the liquid on my hair or on my nightclothes, saying it was accidentally. After a few weeks, my skin was constantly irritated, my hair looked like straw, and the smell, that sour smell, followed me like a shadow. "Why do you always smell bad, Catherine?" Teresa asked one day in the school hallway. "My mom said you can use our bathroom to take a bath if you need to." Shame burned my face like fire. How to explain that I took a bath every day, but that my own father forced me to smell like this? How to say that, even after scrubbing my skin until it was red, that odor wouldn't completely go away because every night the ritual was repeated? At home, after each session with the spoiled milk, I had to clean everything: the bed, the floor, my nightclothes. "To learn to be clean," he would say, watching as I scrubbed the stained mattress at 2 a.m, exhausted and humiliated. I tried to tell Mama. "He makes me drink spoiled milk every night," I said one afternoon when we were alone in the kitchen. She stopped kneading the bread, her hands covered in flour frozen in the air. For a moment, I thought she hadn't heard me. Then I saw a tear roll down her face. "Mama, I'll talk to him," she whispered, returning to kneading the dough forcefully. "I'll make him stop this." But that night, when I heard their shouts in their bedroom, I knew nothing would change. In fact, it got worse. That night, he came with 2 glasses, one for me to drink, another to pour completely over my head. "This is for you to learn not to tell lies about your father," he said, his eyes glowing with contained anger. "The next time you make up stories, it will be much worse." That's when I understood I was alone in that hell. Mama might love me, might want to protect me, but she was also afraid of him. She was also a prisoner. I began to create strategies to survive. I learned to hide small pieces of soap under the mattress to rub on my skin during the night. I began to keep my hair very short. I told Mama I wanted a modern cut, but it was really to make it easier to clean after the milk rituals. I hid clean clothes under the bed to change after he left. At school, I became increasingly isolated. The smell, even when I managed to disguise it, created a barrier between me and the other students. The teachers noticed something was wrong, but in those days, in a small town in the interior, no one interfered in family matters. The worst of all was the night, lying in the darkness, waiting for the door to open, for the sound of his footsteps in the hallway. Sometimes he wouldn't come, and that somehow was even more terrifying, because it meant that the next night would be worse. At 14, I was no longer the cheerful girl who drew in secret and dreamed of love stories. I had become a shadow, walking along the edges of life, trying to be invisible. My eyes, which Mama said were windows of joy, were now always lowered, avoiding contact. That's when everything began to get even worse. The milk rituals continued, but now there was something more in his eyes when he observed me. Something that made me shrink inside, that made me want to disappear completely. One night, after the milk ritual, he didn't leave immediately as usual. He sat on the edge of my bed, looking at me in a way that made my blood freeze. "You're becoming just like your mother," he said, extending his hand to touch my face. I instinctively recoiled, pressing myself against the wall. This seemed to irritate him. "Don't be disgusted by your own father." He got up abruptly and left, slamming the door. I heard him shouting at Mama in their room, accusing her of putting ideas in my head, of teaching me to disrespect him. The next morning, Mama had a bruise on her face that she tried to hide with her hair. Our eyes met in the kitchen, two pairs of eyes full of fear, of silent desperation. "Let's get out of here," I whispered to her as we washed the dishes. "We can go to Grandma Betty's house, or to another town." "It's not that simple, my child," she replied, her voice almost inaudible. "He would find us, and it would be worse." And so we continued, trapped in that house that seemed more like a prison, counting the days, surviving from one moment to the next, waiting for a miracle that seemed to never come. The winter of 1966 was the coldest I remember in Springfield, not just because of the cutting wind that came down from the Ozark Mountains, but because of the ice that had settled inside our house, inside my soul. I had turned 15 that March, but I felt as if I had lived several lifetimes of suffering in just one. The milk ritual continued, night after night, without fail. My body was always marked, the irritated skin, the dull hair even when clean, the brittle nails. At school, I no longer had friends. I always sat at the back of the class, bent over my notebook, trying to make myself invisible. Some teachers tried to approach, but I had built a wall around myself. Telling meant making everything worse. I had already learned that lesson in the worst possible way. Daddy now controlled every aspect of my life. He chose the clothes I would wear, decided when I could speak, even what I ate. "You're getting too fat," he would say, reducing my portions at dinner. Or then, "That blouse is too tight, want to look like a tramp." And he would force me to wear loose shirts that hid any shape of my body. When I returned from school, I had to go straight home. No stopping by the library, no talking with classmates. He timed my journey, and if I took longer than expected, punishment was certain. Mama became increasingly faded, like a candle slowly losing its flame. Her eyes, once just sad, now seemed empty. Her hands trembled when she served coffee, when she set the table, when she folded clothes. One June afternoon, I returned from school and found the house strangely silent. Mama wasn't in the kitchen as usual. I called for her but got no response. With a racing heart, I went to their room and knocked lightly on the door. Nothing. I pushed the door slowly and found her lying on the bed, her face turned to the wall. "Mama, is everything okay?" She didn't respond immediately. When she finally turned, I saw that her face was swollen, her right eye almost closed by a purple bruise that spread to her temple. "My God, Mama, what happened?" I ran to her, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It's nothing, my child," she whispered, trying to smile. "I just slipped and hit the corner of the table." It was a lie, of course. That kind of injury didn't happen in household accidents. I got a damp cloth from the kitchen and returned to help her clean her face. As I gently passed the cloth over the bruise, I noticed other marks, on her arms, on her neck. Marks of fingers, of strong hands that had squeezed with violence. "It was him, wasn't it?" I asked, my voice breaking. She just closed her eyes, tears silently rolling down her bruised face. She didn't need to say anything. The silence confirmed everything. "We need to get out of here, Mama. Today. Now." "We can't," she said, holding my hand with surprising strength. "He would find us. You don't know your father like I do. He has contacts everywhere, other military men who would help him. We would have nowhere to go. And Grandma Betty, she would help us. That would be the first place he would look. And Mother is already very elderly. She couldn't protect us." She dried her tears with the back of her hand. Besides, he swore that if we tried to run away, he would do terrible things. At that moment, I understood the size of our prison. It wasn't just the walls of that house that kept us captive, but fear, a fear so deep that it paralyzed, that poisoned the soul. At night, when Daddy arrived, he acted as if nothing had happened. He sat at the table, demanded that dinner be served, talked about trivial things from the base. Mama moved like a ghost through the kitchen, serving him in silence, eyes lowered, her still swollen face now covered by a layer of powder that barely disguised the bruises. He looked at me throughout the meal. Not directly, but from the corner of his eyes, observing my every move. I felt like an animal being studied by a predator, waiting for the right moment to pounce. When we finished eating, he ordered me to wash the dishes while Mama cleaned the rest of the kitchen. With my back to the sink, I could feel his eyes on me, burning like embers. "You're starting to look like your mother when she was young," he said, his voice strangely calm. "But I hope you're more obedient than she is." A chill ran down my spine. I continued washing the dishes, my hands trembling under the water. That night, the milk ritual was different. He entered my room later than usual, after midnight. Instead of just one glass, he brought an entire bottle of spoiled milk. The sour smell immediately filled the room. "Today you deserve special treatment," he said, his voice low and threatening. I sat up in bed, against the headboard, trying to get as far away as possible. "Please, Daddy, I didn't do anything wrong." "No? And that conversation with your mother this afternoon? You think I don't know what you two are whispering behind my back?" He approached, leaning over me. "You think I don't know that you're making up stories about me to others? I never said anything to anyone, I swear." He grabbed my arm with such force that I felt as if the bones might break. "Liar, just like your mother." What followed was a nightmare that even after so many years still makes me wake up sweating in the middle of the night. He poured the milk over my head, soaking my hair, my face, my clothes. The viscous, fetid liquid ran down my neck, permeating every inch of my skin. Meanwhile, he murmured terrible words, calling me dirty, impure, saying I needed to be cleaned inside and out. When the bottle emptied, he threw the rest of the contents on the floor, forming a disgusting puddle beside the bed. "Clean all of this up," he ordered, throwing an old cloth at me. "And I don't want to see a single drop tomorrow morning." After he left, I collapsed on the soaked floor, silently sobbing, my entire body shaking. The smell was unbearable, the humiliation even worse. I spent hours cleaning, the floor, the mattress, myself. I tried to wash in the small bucket I kept hidden under the bed, but without being able to completely remove that odor that seemed to have embedded itself in my skin. The next morning, Mama saw my condition, the red and swollen eyes, the irritated skin, and understood what had happened. Without saying a word, she prepared an herbal infusion and gave it to me to drink. "It will help with the discomfort," she whispered, caressing my damp hair that I had just washed. "And put some on your skin too. It helps calm the irritation." When Daddy left for work, she approached and hugged me tightly, as she hadn't done in a long time. I felt her tears wetting my shoulder. "Forgive me, my child," she murmured. "Forgive me for not being able to protect you." At that moment, I realized something important. Mama wasn't my jailer. She was a prisoner, just as much as I was. The difference was that her chains were older, deeper, forged by years of fear and violence. The following weeks were a blur of terror and anguish. The milk ritual began to happen almost every night, always more violent, more humiliating. Sometimes he would force me to kneel on the floor while he poured the liquid over me, saying I needed to learn humility. Other times, he forced me to drink glass after glass until my stomach turned and I vomited. Then he made me clean everything up. At school, my situation drastically worsened. The smell, which now seemed permanent, transformed me into a target of cruel jokes. "Here comes the stinky one," they whispered when I passed. Some girls dramatically covered their noses, others pretended to faint. The teachers tried to intervene, but the damage was already done. One day, the principal, Mrs. Sullivan, called me to her office. She was a severe but fair woman, respected by everyone in small-town Springfield. "Catherine, I need to know what's happening with you," she said, seated behind her impeccably organized desk. "Your teachers are concerned. Your grades have dropped, you no longer participate in classes, and—" she hesitated. "There are complaints about your personal hygiene." I lowered my eyes, shame burning my face. "Is everything okay at home?" she asked, her voice softer. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words didn't come out. What could I say? The truth was so absurd, so horrible, that even I couldn't fully comprehend it. And the fear of what Daddy would do if he discovered I had spoken, paralyzed me. "Yes, ma'am," I lied, my voice barely audible. "Everything is fine." She studied me for a long moment, her penetrating eyes seeming to see through my lie. "You know you can trust me, don't you? If something is wrong, I can help." I wanted so much to believe her. I wanted so much to tell everything, to throw out that poisonous secret that was consuming me from within. But then I remembered his words. "If you tell anyone, it will be much worse, and not just for you." "Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan," I replied, forcing a smile. "But everything is fine, really. I'm just going through a difficult phase." She sighed, clearly not convinced. "Well, if you change your mind, my door is always open." I left there with a heavy heart, knowing I had lost an opportunity to seek help. But fear was greater than hope at that moment. At home, things continued to deteriorate. Mama was increasingly weak, both physically and emotionally. Many times I found her sitting alone in the kitchen, staring at nothing, tears silently rolling down her face. Other times, she murmured prayers, holding a small rosary hidden in her apron pocket. One afternoon, arriving from school, I heard screams coming from their room. His voice, furious as always, and then a dull thud, the sound of a body falling. I ran to see what had happened and found Mama on the floor, unconscious, a trickle of blood running from her temple. Daddy was standing over her, his fists clenched, his face contorted with rage. "What did you do?" I screamed, running to help my mother. He grabbed me by the arm, throwing me against the wall with force. "This is none of your business. Go to your room." "No, she needs a doctor." His hands found my neck, squeezing until I could no longer breathe. "You will do as I say," he hissed, his face inches from mine, "or you'll end up like her." When he released me, I fell to my knees, coughing and choking, the air burning in my lungs. Mama was beginning to move on the floor, moaning softly. "Go to your room," he repeated, his voice now controlled, almost normal. "Now." I looked at Mama one more time, her semi-open eyes meeting mine, silently begging me to obey, not to provoke him further. With a broken heart, I dragged myself to my room, closing the door behind me. That night, the milk ritual was replaced by something worse. Much worse. He entered my room late at night, smelling of whiskey and sweat. He sat on the edge of my bed, observing me in the dim light. I pretended to be asleep, but my entire body was tense, prepared for what would come, the spoiled milk, the insults, the usual humiliation. But that's not what happened. "I know you're awake," he murmured, his hand finding my arm under the blanket. You don't need to pretend with me. I opened my eyes slowly, fear freezing my blood. Your mother is no longer in a condition to fulfill her duties, he said, his voice strangely calm. Now, you will have to take over her responsibilities. I didn't immediately understand what he meant. I thought he was referring to household chores, cooking, cleaning, washing clothes. But there was something in his eyes, something predatory and terrible, that made me realize he was talking about something else. Daddy, please, I whispered, trying to move away. I'm tired. Can we talk about this tomorrow? His hand tightened on my arm. I'm not asking, Catherine. I'm ordering. What followed was the worst night of my life. A night that, for many years, I tried to erase from memory, push to the darkest corners of my mind. A night when my own father destroyed the last vestige of innocence I still possessed, forcibly taking what should never have been his. When he finally left my room, I lay in the darkness, motionless like a broken doll. There were no tears, just a deep emptiness, a black hole that seemed to have swallowed my soul. Dawn found me like this, eyes fixed on the ceiling, the body aching and the mind trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. In the following weeks, the spoiled milk ritual was replaced by this new torment. Night after night, he would come to my room, destroying a bit more of me with each visit. Sometimes I tried to resist, but that only made him more violent. I learned it was better to stay quiet, to let my mind wander far away while my body endured the unbearable. Mama must have realized what was happening. I saw it in her eyes, the horror, the guilt, the despair. But she was as broken as I was, so trapped in her own cage of terror that she could no longer fight. One morning, after Daddy left for the base, she came into my room. She sat on the edge of the bed where I still lay, curled up under the blankets. "My child," she said, her voice trembling, "we need to find a way to end this." I looked at her, surprised to hear determination in her voice after so long. "How?" I asked, the word coming out harsh from my dry throat. "I don't know yet, but I'll think of something." She gently caressed my face. "You just need to hold on a little longer. I promise I won't let this continue." I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to believe that there was a way out, that this nightmare could end. But after so much suffering, hope seemed like a luxury I could no longer afford. At school, I was just a shadow. I barely spoke, barely ate, barely existed. Some teachers still tried to approach, but I had built walls so high around myself that no one could reach me anymore. My grades, once excellent, plummeted to the lowest levels. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't think of anything beyond surviving each day, each night. It was around this time that I began to feel the first symptoms. At first, I thought it was just my body reacting to the constant trauma, the morning sickness, the extreme fatigue, the sensitivity in certain parts of the body. But when my menstrual period, always regular since it had begun, didn't come for 2 consecutive months, a new terror settled in me. I remember sitting in the school bathroom, alone during break, mentally counting the weeks, trying to deny what my body already knew. The tears came nonstop, silent and bitter. How could I be pregnant at 15? How could I be carrying my own father's child? The reality was so grotesque, so obscene that my mind struggled to process it. I thought of all the stories I had heard about girls who got lost and ended up taking care of it. Teas of certain herbs, accidental falls, shadowy procedures performed by mysterious women in the outskirts of town. But I had no access to any of that. I had no money of my own, no freedom to seek help, no one to trust besides Mama. That afternoon, when I returned home, I found her in the kitchen preparing dinner. I waited until I was sure we were alone, and then, in an almost inaudible voice, told her my suspicions. The impact was visible. Her face turned pale, the glass she was holding slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. For a long moment she stood motionless, as if she had turned to stone. "Are you sure?" she finally asked, her voice no more than a whisper. I nodded, unable to repeat those terrible words. She moved then, quickly cleaning up the glass shards, nervously looking at the door as if fearing he might enter at any moment. "He can't know," she whispered, holding my hands tightly. "Never, do you understand? If he finds out—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew that if Daddy found out, the consequences would be catastrophic. He could kill us, or worse, he could keep us alive in an even deeper hell than the current one. "What are we going to do?" I asked, the desperation evident in my voice. "I'll think of something," she promised, her eyes meeting mine with a determination I hadn't seen in years. "But I need a little time. Can you hide it for now?" I looked at my still thin body, with no visible signs of the life growing inside me. "I think so. For a few weeks at least." "Well, then that's what we'll do. Keep a low profile, wear loose clothes, and let me take care of the rest." That night, lying in my bed, waiting for the moment when the door would open and the nightmare would begin again, I felt a change within me. It wasn't just the baby. It was something deeper, more fundamental. The awareness that this situation could not continue. That, somehow, I needed to find a way out. Not just for me, but for the innocent life that now depended on me. I touched my still flat belly and made a silent promise. "I'm going to get you out of here. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I'm going to find a path away from this hell." That pregnancy changed everything inside me. As if a switch had been flipped, awakening a strength I didn't know existed. It wasn't just for me anymore. It was for that innocent life growing in my womb. For 3 weeks I managed to hide my condition. I wore loose blouses, avoided sudden movements, and when morning sickness came, I would run silently to the bathroom at the back of the house. Mama helped me as she could, preparing teas that relieved the discomfort and covering for my absence when Daddy asked about me. But we knew it was only a matter of time until he discovered. My 15-year-old body was beginning to change, and his eyes, always attentive, would certainly notice. It was on a gray Tuesday in August that everything came to a breaking point. I was in the kitchen helping Mama prepare dinner when the front door slammed shut. Daddy arrived earlier than usual from the base, his face red with anger. Without saying a word, he threw a paper on the table. It was a medical certificate from the Army infirmary. During a routine examination, they had noticed certain irregularities in his blood. The doctor recommended a strict diet and total suspension of alcohol consumption. "Have you been messing with my things?" he shouted at Mama, grabbing her by the arm. "Put something in my food?" "No, Walter, I swear I didn't," she replied, trembling. "Liar!" He pushed her against the stove. "These doctors say I have liver problems. How would that happen if it wasn't for some garbage you put in my food?" Without thinking, I placed myself between them. "Leave her alone. She didn't do anything." His eyes fixed on me, furious. Then, something changed in his look. He observed me from top to bottom, lingering on my slightly wider waist under the loose blouse. "What do we have here?" he murmured, advancing toward me. "Seems like someone is hiding something." I instinctively backed away, protecting my belly with my hands. It was my mistake. That instinctive gesture confirmed his suspicions. With a quick movement, he grabbed my blouse, pulling it up. "I knew it, you filthy tramp." "It's not what you're thinking," Mama tried to intervene, desperate. "Shut up," he roared, pushing her away. He turned to me, his eyes burning with hatred. "Who was it? Which schoolboy got you pregnant? You're going to tell me now or I'll beat it out of you." A deadly silence filled the kitchen. How to tell the truth? How to say that the father of the child was himself? It was Mama who spoke, her voice surprisingly firm. "Leave her alone, Walter. The child is yours." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I will never forget his expression. First confusion, then understanding, and finally a rage so deep it seemed to come from the depths of hell. "What?" he whispered, his voice dangerously low. "You heard me," Mama continued, moving to stand by my side. "The baby is yours, the fruit of what you did to our daughter all those nights." He stood motionless for an instant, processing those words. Then he exploded in a violence like I had never seen before. He charged at us both, knocking over the kitchen table in the process. Mama pushed me behind her, receiving the first blow that was meant for me. "Run, Catherine," she shouted as she struggled to hold him back. But I couldn't move. I couldn't leave her alone with him in that state. I grabbed the first thing I found, an iron skillet, and hit his back with all my strength. He turned, surprised by the blow, momentarily stunned. It was enough for Mama to break free. She grabbed my hand and we ran to the backyard, locking the kitchen door behind us. "The cabinet!" she shouted. "Push the cabinet against the door!" Together, we pushed the heavy pantry cabinet against the door, which was already shaking with the blows he was delivering from the other side. "It won't hold for long," Mama said, breathless. "We need the plan now." "What plan?" "The one I've been preparing for weeks." She ran to the back of the yard, moving some loose bricks near the wash basin. From an improvised hiding place, she retrieved a small bundle and a wooden box. "I've been saving money for years, a little at a time. And this—" She opened the box, revealing a white powder. "What is this?" "Concentrated laxative. I bought it from Mrs. Wilson, who works at the pharmacy. I said it was for me because of intestinal problems." The blows on the door grew stronger. The cabinet began to move. "We'll do it like this," she explained quickly. "When he manages to get through, I'll say we're sorry, that we want to talk. I'll offer to make the coffee he likes, with that sweet bread. You stay quiet, looking scared. When he calms down a bit, I'll put this in his coffee. It's very strong. It will make him run to the bathroom in minutes. And then, while he's trapped in the bathroom, we grab the things I've already set aside under my bed and run away. I have enough money for us to catch a bus far from here." It was a simple plan, almost naive, but it was our only chance. I nodded, my heart beating so hard it seemed to want to leap out of my chest. The cabinet finally gave way, and the door opened with a crash. Daddy appeared in the yard, his face contorted with rage, a piece of wood in his hand. "You two are going to pay for this," he roared. Mama immediately changed her posture, shrinking, appearing defeated. "Forgive us, Walter. We lost our heads, but we want to talk." He advanced, suspicious. "Talk? After what you did?" "Please," she begged, hands extended in supplication. "Think of the baby. It's your blood too." Those words seemed to reach him somehow. He stopped, still furious, but now hesitant. "Let me make some coffee," Mama suggested, her voice soft. "We can sit and discuss this like adults." He lowered the piece of wood, still tense like a snake ready to strike. "Make the coffee. But if you try anything—" "We won't try anything," she promised, moving slowly back to the kitchen. We followed the plan to the letter. While Mama prepared the coffee, I sat quietly at the table, pretending to be terrified, which wasn't difficult. Daddy watched us, still standing, the distrust evident in every tense muscle of his body. When the coffee was ready, Mama served a cup for him, adding 2 spoonfuls of sugar to disguise the taste of the laxative. She also offered the sweet bread that she knew was his weakness. "Drink it while it's hot," she suggested, sitting on the other side of the table. He took the cup, still staring at us. He took a sip, then another. He took a bite of the bread. With each passing second, my heart raced more. "So," he began, his voice a little calmer now, "you think you can attack me and then pretend nothing happened?" "No, of course not," Mama replied, eyes lowered. "But we need to think about the future. About the baby." He took another sip of the coffee, finishing the cup. "The baby," he murmured, looking at my belly. There was something disturbing in that look. It wasn't anger, but a kind of sick possessiveness. "My son." That's when it started. First, an expression of discomfort crossed his face. He shifted in his chair, restless, then a grimace of pain. "What?" he began, holding his stomach. "What did you put in this coffee?" Mama maintained an innocent expression. "Just what you like, sugar and a little cinnamon." He got up abruptly, his face contorted with pain. "You—" He couldn't finish the sentence. He doubled over, groaning. I think something didn't agree with you, Mama commented, showing no emotion. The bathroom is in that direction, remember? With one last look of hatred, he ran to the bathroom, slamming the door shut. Mama immediately stood up. Now, Catherine, quick! We ran to her room, where a small suitcase was already prepared under the bed. She grabbed the money hidden in a shoebox at the back of the closet, while I ran to my room to get the only photo I had of my Grandma Betty and a St. Christopher medal she had given me. From the bathroom, we could hear groans and curses. The laxative was taking effect, and from the sound of it, it would be a prolonged effect. We have to get to the bus station, Mama whispered as we left through the front door. There's a bus to Kansas City at 6 in the evening. And then? I asked as we ran down the street, looking back every few steps. Then we'll think about the next step. The important thing now is to get out of Springfield. We were almost at the end of the street when I heard a terrible scream coming from our house. He had discovered our escape. Run! Mama shouted, squeezing my hand. He won't be able to follow us for a while, not in the state he's in. We ran like we had never run before, crossing streets, taking shortcuts through yards, sneaking through alleys. The small suitcase banged against our legs, but we didn't dare stop. When we finally reached the bus station, we were breathless, sweaty, but with a sensation I hadn't felt in years: hope. The bus to Kansas City was already at the platform, almost ready to depart. 2 for Kansas City, Mama requested at the counter, her hands trembling as she handed over the money. With tickets in hand, we ran for the bus, climbing the steps at the exact moment the driver was closing the doors. We sat in the back seats, ducking down so as not to be seen through the windows. The engine roared. The bus began to move. Only when we left the limits of Springfield, already on the highway that cut through cornfields, did I allow myself to breathe normally. We made it, I whispered, still not quite believing it. Mama squeezed my hand, silent tears rolling down her face. Yes, my child, we are free. But something still bothered me. What if he looks for us? He has contacts, knows people in the army. Mama looked out the window at the lights of Springfield that were getting farther and farther away. A strange, almost wild smile appeared on her lips. I think he'll have more urgent problems to solve. What do you mean? Before we left, while you were getting your things. She hesitated, as if weighing whether or not she should tell me. I went back to the kitchen and turned on the stove. Turned on the stove? I repeated, confused, and left a cloth soaked with alcohol right next to it, and that old curtain in the living room, which always catches fire easily. I understood then what she had done. I looked out the back window of the bus, at the horizon behind us. In the dark sky over Springfield, a column of smoke was beginning to form, tinged red by the flames that certainly were already consuming our old house. I didn't feel sorry. I didn't feel remorse. I felt only that, finally, justice had been done. That house wasn't a home. It was a prison, a torture chamber. And now, its walls that had witnessed so much suffering were being purified by fire. Where are we really going? I asked, realizing that Kansas City would be just our first stop. Far away, Mama replied, putting her arm around my shoulders. To a place where he will never find us, where we can start over, you, me, and... She lightly touched my belly. This little angel who, despite everything, is a blessing. I rested my head on her shoulder, exhausted but relieved. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to close my eyes without fear of what would happen while I slept. We were finally free. Kansas City was just our first stop. We stayed there for only 3 days, staying in a simple boarding house near the bus station. Mama was paranoid, thinking that at any moment Daddy or some military colleague of his would appear. We need to go somewhere where no one knows us, where he would never think to look, she would say, always looking over her shoulder. It was in a local newspaper that we found the answer. A small ad was looking for women to work on a cotton farm in rural Georgia. Housing and meals provided, the ad said. Georgia was hundreds of miles from Springfield, in another state, far from my father's circle of influence. It's perfect, Mama said, circling the ad with a pencil. "No one will look for us there." The next day, we caught another bus, this time to Memphis, Tennessee. From there, after another day of waiting, we got transportation to Oakwood in southeastern Georgia. The journey was long and tiring, especially for me, who was suffering from pregnancy sickness. But each mile that took us away from Springfield was a relief, as if the air became more breathable, as if the weight on my shoulders gradually diminished. We arrived in Oakwood on a hot September afternoon. It was a larger town than Springfield, with wider and busier streets. The Sunnybrook farm was about 12 miles from the center, and we got a ride with a milk truck that was going in that direction. The owner of the farm, Mr. Oliver Fitzgerald, was a middle-aged man, a widower with calloused hands and skin weathered by the sun. He looked at us with suspicion when we arrived. A woman of almost 40 and a pregnant teenager, with no luggage beyond a small suitcase, asking for work. "Where do you come from?" he asked, studying us from the porch of the big house. Mama had already prepared our story. "From Chicago, sir. My husband died, left a lot of debts. We had to leave there in a hurry. Creditors were threatening to take everything." "And the girl?" Mr. Fitzgerald asked, looking at my belly that was beginning to show the pregnancy. "My daughter," Mama replied, without hesitation. "The father of the child ran away when he found out, an irresponsible boy." He nodded slowly, as if he were accustomed to hearing stories of misfortune. "I have work in the kitchen and cleaning the house. The women's quarters are in the back. It's not much, but it has a roof and walls." "It's more than enough," Mama replied, gratitude evident in her voice. That night, lying on narrow beds in the room shared with 3 other women who worked on the farm, Mama whispered to me, "We changed our names. From now on, I'm Ellen and you're Mary. Never use our real names again." I silently agreed. Catherine and Margaret had been left behind, along with the burning house and the years of suffering. The first months at Sunnybrook Farm were ones of adaptation. Mama, now Ellen, worked in the kitchen, preparing meals for the farm workers. I helped with cleaning the big house, doing light work due to the pregnancy. The other women treated us with initial reserve, but gradually began to accept us. Mrs. Josephine, the head cook, was the first to really welcome us. A black woman in her 60s, with a smile that lit up her face marked by time. She took Mama under her protection. "I know scared eyes when I see them," she said one day as they kneaded bread together. "You're running from someone, aren't you? You don't need to tell me who. Just know that here, no one will find you." In January 1967, when my belly was already quite big, we received the first news from Springfield. A newspaper that arrived at the farm carried a small note about a fire that had occurred months earlier. A house on Maple Street had been destroyed by fire. The body of a man, identified as Walter Thompson, an Army sergeant, was found charred in the bathroom. A domestic accident was suspected. Mama read the news aloud to me, late at night, when we were alone in our corner of the quarters. We didn't say anything afterward. There was nothing to say. He was dead. He would never find us, never hurt us again. It was the end of a nightmare. Marianne was born in February 1967 on a rainy night. Mrs. Josephine delivered the baby right there on the farm with Mama's help. It was a difficult birth. I was only 16 and my body wasn't fully prepared yet. But when I finally held my daughter in my arms, something happened inside me. Looking at that perfect little face, those tiny fingers, I promised that she would never know the kind of pain I knew. She would never know the truth about her origin. For her father would always be a boy I met at school who left without knowing about the pregnancy. Mr. Fitzgerald, surprisingly, was very generous. He allowed us to stay on the farm, offered a separate room for the 3 of us when Marianne was born, and even served as godfather at the baby's baptism in the small farm chapel. "Every child deserves a decent start," he said on the occasion, awkward with the newborn in his arms. Over time, our life gained a new routine. Mama became the main cook when Mrs. Josephine became too elderly for heavy work. I began to help with the farm administration since I had good handwriting and knew how to do accounts. Mary Ann grew strong and healthy, loved by everyone on the farm, running among the cotton fields, playing with the children of other workers. We stayed at Sunnybrook Farm for almost 10 years. They were times of healing, of reconstruction. Slowly, the nightmares diminished. Mama's frightened eyes regained their sparkle. My body, previously always tense, ready to flee or defend itself, began to relax. We learned to laugh again, to make plans, to look to the future with hope instead of terror. It was in 1976 that our life changed again. Mr. Fitzgerald fell seriously ill, a cancer that spread rapidly. Before dying, he called Mama and me to his room. "You have been like family to me," he said, his voice weak, holding our hands. "In the will, I left something for you. It's not much, but it's enough to start a new life in town if you want." He passed away a week later. The will revealed that he had left us a small house in Oakwood and a sum of money that, although modest, would give us a new start. His only son, who lived in Atlanta and rarely visited the farm, decided to sell it. It was time for us to leave. In Oakwood, using the money left by Mr. Fitzgerald, we opened a small business, a stand of typical Southern food at the municipal market. Mama made the sweets and savories, and I took care of the sales. Mary Ann, then almost 10 years old, helped as she could, charming customers with her easy smile and communicative manner. Our stand grew into a permanent store in the municipal market, then into a small restaurant in the center of town. Catherine's Country Kitchen, we called it, in honor of the name Mama adopted when we fled. We became known in town, the ladies of Southern cooking, as they affectionately called us. It was at the restaurant that I met Albert, a widowed merchant who was charmed by my biscuits. We began a friendship that slowly blossomed into something more. He was patient with me, respecting my fears, my hesitation to trust any man. I didn't tell him everything about my past. Some wounds are too deep to be exposed. But he knew I carried invisible scars. We married in 1980 when Mary Ann was 13 years old. It was a simple ceremony, just for the closest friends. Albert was a good husband, a good stepfather to Mary Ann. We never had children together. The experiences of the past had left marks on my body and soul that made it difficult to conceive again. Mama, who continued to be Ellen until the end, lived to see Mary Ann graduate as a teacher, marry, and have her first child. She passed away in 1988, peacefully, in her sleep. In her last years, she rarely spoke of the past. It was as if she had decided that that part of her life didn't deserve to occupy space in her memories. She preferred to focus on the present, on the small daily joys, her great-grandson's smile, the smell of fresh bread, the warmth of the sun on Sunday afternoons. On her deathbed, she held my hand and whispered, "We did the right thing, my child. Never regret it." And I never regretted it. What we did that night in Springfield was an act of survival, of liberation. The fire that consumed our old house purified our past, opened the way for a new life. We never knew for certain if the body found was really Daddy's. Part of me always feared that he had somehow survived, that one day he would appear at the door of our restaurant with that look that terrified me in nightmares. But the years passed, and he never came. If he survived, he never found us. If he died, he took his sins to the grave. Albert passed away in 2010 after a brief struggle with a heart condition. It was a hard blow, but different from the pain I knew in my youth. It was a clean, honest pain, the pain of losing someone we truly love, not the terror of living with someone who mistreats us. Today, at 73 years old, I live a peaceful life in Oakwood. My restaurant is now mainly managed by my oldest granddaughter, although I still show up almost every day to supervise the kitchen. Mary Ann and her 3 children live nearby, and we see each other frequently. My grandchildren grew up hearing edited stories about my childhood in Missouri, softened versions that preserve their innocence, that protect their mother's memory. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I think about Catherine, that girl I was, who suffered so much, who almost lost herself in darkness. I think about how she found strength to survive, to escape, to build a new life. And I feel proud of her, of this younger version of myself who refused to be defeated. The past never completely abandons us. There are nights when I still wake up frightened, feeling the phantom smell of spoiled milk, hearing imaginary footsteps in the hallway. But these moments are increasingly rare, more distant. The present is stronger than the past. The love I built is more powerful than the hatred I faced. And when I look at Marianne, at my grandchildren, at the life we managed to build after escaping that hell, I know it was worth it. Every scar, every tear, every moment of terror. It was all worth it to get here, to this peace I finally found. Today, here in Oakwood, my life is very different from that frightened girl from Springfield. I wake up early, around 5 in the morning, a habit I never lost even after retiring. I like this quiet moment of dawn, when the town is still asleep and I can hear the first birds announcing the day. My little morning ritual includes a strong, freshly brewed coffee, sitting on the back porch, watching the sky change color. Then, even with aching joints protesting, I go to the restaurant. Catherine's country kitchen is no longer just mine. My granddaughter Sarah has been managing it for 5 years, but I still like to show up almost every day. "Grandma, you don't need to come today," she always says on the phone. And I always reply, "If I don't go to the restaurant, what will I do at home? Talk to the walls?" The truth is that the restaurant keeps me alive. When I'm there, supervising the seasoning of the fried chicken or teaching some young cook how to make cornbread the right way, I feel useful, connected to the world. The people of Oakwood know me, respect me. I'm Miss Catherine of the Southern Cooking, a local institution, as they say. Marianne, my daughter, has been a teacher at the local school for more than 30 years. She graduated, married Jonathan, had 3 wonderful children, Sarah, 32, Luke, 28, and Julie, 25. They all grew up between the tables of the restaurant, learning to knead dough and serve customers from an early age. My house is a few blocks from the restaurant, a simple but comfortable building on Oakwood Avenue. It was the first house I bought with my own money when the restaurant began to prosper. I have a backyard with fruit trees, peach, apple, cherry, that I tend to with all my care. On weekends, it's where the family gathers for lunches that extend into the afternoon. After Albert's death, I thought the loneliness would be unbearable. It was difficult, yes, but I discovered a strength in me that I didn't even know existed, the ability to rebuild life, to find purpose even after losing someone so dear. Perhaps it's a skill I developed very early, when I had to start from scratch on that farm in 1966. I keep myself busy beyond the restaurant. I participate in the craft group of the local church, where we make items for charity bazaars. On Tuesdays, I give Southern cooking classes to teenagers at the community center, a project that started small and now has a waiting list. My grandchildren are my greatest joy. Sarah, the oldest, inherited my talent for cooking and my entrepreneurial spirit. Luke followed a different path. He's an agricultural engineer working with sustainable planting techniques. Julie, the youngest, is a teacher like her mother, but she teaches music. She has a privileged ear that certainly didn't come from my side of the family. About the past, I speak little. Marianne knows a softened version of the story. She knows we fled from a violent father, but I never told the darkest details, never revealed the complete truth about her origin. That's a secret I'll take with me. For her, her biological father was a high school boyfriend who disappeared before knowing about the pregnancy. It's better that way. I have my difficult moments, of course. Birthdays are particularly complicated, not mine, but Mama's, which we always celebrated with so much affection. There are days when the ghosts of the past seem closer, more real. Days when the smell of milk makes me shudder inexplicably, when the sound of boots on the floor makes me hold my breath for an instant. But I've learned not to let these moments dominate me. When the memories get too intense, I go out for a walk around downtown Oakwood, greet acquaintances, stop for coffee in the square. The present has a healing power. Each smile, Each good morning, Miss Catherine, anchors me in this life I've built, takes me away from the one I left behind. At night, I like to sit on the porch with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the movement on the street, families returning home, lights turning on in windows. In these moments, I feel a deep peace, a gratitude for the life I have now. I never went back to Springfield. I don't know if the house was rebuilt, if there's still anyone who remembers the Thompson family who lived on Maple Street. I don't know if there's a grave with Walter's name in some cemetery in that town. And I don't want to know. That chapter is closed, sealed, buried in the past. What matters is that I'm here, in Oakwood, a town that welcomed me when I needed it most, that gave me the chance to be another person, not just through the false name I initially adopted, but through the opportunity to rebuild my identity, to become someone beyond the victim I once was. When I look back at the entire journey traveled, I feel a mixture of sadness and pride. Sadness for what I had to endure, for what Mama suffered, for the years we lost in fear and pain. But pride for having survived, for having found the courage to escape, to start over, to transform ashes into new life. And when my grandchildren ask me what the secret of my strength is, I simply say, life is like a patchwork quilt. Even the darkest and ugliest pieces, when sewn with the colorful and beautiful ones, create something unique and valuable. What's important isn't what material the patches are made of, but how we choose to sew them together. My dears who are listening to me now, after sharing so many pains and joys with you, I want to leave some advice that I carry in my heart. No matter how dark the night is, dawn always comes. I lived through hell at home, at the hands of the one who should have protected me, but I found strength where I thought nothing existed beyond fear. I learned that age doesn't define our strength, but rather our ability to start over each day. My wrinkles are maps of survival. Each one tells a story of pain overcome. Life taught me that even in the deepest darkness, our inner light never goes out. I discovered that we are stronger than we imagine, especially when we think we can't take any more. If you know someone living silently with a monster at home, as I lived, extend your hand. In any country, in any culture, there are people and organizations ready to help. The signs are there. The lowered gaze, jumping at the slightest noise, excuses for unexplained injuries. Don't close your eyes. Your intervention could save a life, as my mother and I saved each other. My experience taught me that our story doesn't end with the painful chapters. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it teaches us to live with them and still smile. And that, my dears, is the greatest victory. And now I need to ask something very important from you who are watching me. If you know a woman who lives frightened, who changes her behavior when her husband arrives, who always has excuses for bruises, share this video with her immediately. Do it privately, send it as a message, because this video could be the turning point in her life. It could show that there is a way out, that there is hope. Hit the notification bell and subscribe to the Grandparents' Tales channel now so that more stories like mine can reach those who need to hear that it's possible to escape, that it's possible to start over. Each subscription to this channel is like a hand extended to someone who is where I was one day. Tell me in the comments, have you ever helped someone get out of an abusive situation? Or do you know someone who needs help? Your experience could save lives. Because, my dears, what I never told anyone until today is that on the darkest nights, when I thought about giving up everything, it was the image of my daughter growing up in the hands of that monster that gave me strength to fight. And that strength is inside each one of you, waiting for the moment to awaken.